Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P. Joe Pisapia with you today. Mr. Big Pod Energy, Andrew Erickson, is back for some more. The best groomed beard in the business, Derek Brown, a.k.a. D-Bro, a.k.a. the King of Bros, is with us as well. And we've got one of my favorite topics to discuss. To me, the last 3 years of fantasy football have been decided on identifying the wide receivers who can make a jump from wide receiver 3 group to number 2s and number 2s to number 1s. And today, it's all about the ones. Who are the next potential wide receiver 1s? We're going to tell you who might be in that category in this podcast today. And we're going to break down the names and tell you where some of these wide receiver 1s might be coming from in terms of where they are in their careers and what teams might be able to facilitate that. But before we get going, I want to talk about another wide receiver 1. How about Deebo Samuel? That's right, because that guy jumped into that tier, didn't he, last year? That was fun. And now you can get an autographed Deebo Samuel helmet thanks to our friends at PristineAuction.com. Just head over to FantasyPros.com/contest to get that. And all you have to do is subscribe to our YouTube channel, YouTube.com/FantasyPros. Subscribe to the YouTube, screenshot that, click that bell for notifications, and then head over to FantasyPros.com/contest. And then you can get that Deebo Samuel autographed helmet, and all is right with the world. Plus, we know we're in May and June here. It's best ball season, and we've got you covered for all the best ball drafts that you're doing with our best ball draft kit over at FantasyPros.com/bestball. That's right. I know, crazy to put the best ball at the end of the slash, but we did it because we're crazy here at Fantasy Pros, and we've got an amazing amount of content in that best ball draft kit. We're talking the rankings, we're talking strategies, roster construction advice, all of that's there for you, and it's free, but there's also a hidden door. And when you are a subscriber to Fantasy Pros and you have a higher membership here with us, you get access to even more incredible best ball content. So check out the free best ball kit over at FantasyPros.com/bestball, but don't be afraid to peek behind the door and see all the cool stuff we got going on there as well. Speaking of cool stuff, here's 2 cool guys right here talking football with me. So guys, before we kick things off, this episode I think is extremely important. And there's a great article that Sam Reiner actually did on our site at FantasyPros.com, which is identifying the next wide receiver 1. So just for a little backstory here, some great data from 2012 to 2021. There's an average of 7.3 different wide receiver 1s in PPR formats year over year. So you can assume that there's going to be some turnover in this grouping year over year. Certainly some years stay a little bit more consistent than others, but still 7 different ones out of 12. That's pretty high turnover rate. Since 2012, 34% of wide receiver 1s first reach that mark in their 3rd NFL season, and 20%, just over 20%, do it in their 2nd season. So basically, wide receiver 1s are coming from the 2nd and 3rd year breakout seasons. So, Andrew, when you hear that kind of data, and then you see also some of the rookies who've been able to do it, like Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson over the last few years, how does this ring true to you in terms of the turnover at wide receiver 1 and where these guys are coming from in their careers?
Yeah, it just kind of goes to show that the receivers that are entering the NFL are just coming in more seasoned. Like they're ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
They're ready to make an instant impact. The days of waiting for, year 4, these year 3 breakouts are just, they're not as common anymore. Like if you don't hit the ground running by year 2, it's like then you need to like slam on the panic button. You're like, oh my God, like you got to show something that shows, okay, you're improving, you're getting better. So like, especially when rookies get hurt, their first year and they don't flash at all. It's like, what do we do with this guy? And you have the rare occasions where you have like a DJ Chark season in his 2nd year where he basically did nothing as a rookie, but where's DJ Chark now? Like he's not talked about as a wide receiver. So even though he ended up hitting his 2nd year, the fact that he did nothing as a rookie ultimately kind of played into his ultimate fate right now, where he is now a ancillary receiver on the Detroit Lions and doesn't have a lot of fantasy value. So I think it's just so early that we're getting production early on from these players, and the fact that so many wide receivers are on the field at the same time, it gives opportunities to more players to ascend to wide receiver 1, as opposed to before when there were only some receivers, a handful of receivers that were commanding so many targets, where nowadays you're seeing tons, 30 receivers, 40 receivers seeing above 100 targets. And that's going to give them a better opportunity to finish as a wide receiver 1.
Derek Brown, did it hit you in the gut when it, with that number of 7, just over 7, basically, a turnover from 12 wide receiver 1s? So you've got 12 wide receiver 1s in a class, right? In a group. where you list the top 12 guys. 7 different ones year over year is typically the average. That kind of hit me, and it was kind of stunning for a second, but it makes sense. I mean, sure, injuries play a part, but also the turnover of offenses, turnover of quarterback, so many different factors can come into play here. But did that kind of surprise you, that number and how high it was in terms of the turnover?
It did in the sense, but I mean, we see this play out every year in fantasy football with variance and the ascension of different offenses and things like that. So this really all, to put a bow on this comes down to, you don't need to be expecting last year to repeat itself. So just because Cooper Kupp was the wide receiver 1 overall, he smashed and grabbed last year, doesn't mean necessarily that's going to happen and he's going to go legend mode in 2022. As the other side of the coin, players that have done so in previous seasons doesn't mean that we can't see this come back or new players jump up into these ranks. So I think a lot of this comes down to the variance that we see from team to team and just in fantasy football in general. So, I mean, don't approach your drafts expecting everything else just to walk back into it. It's not saying that these players can't repeat, but you do need to be mixing up your player exposures when you get into 10, 12 fantasy leagues and you're playing best ball and what have you, and really looking at the range of outcomes.
Yeah, and I always say this is so crucial, because if you can identify the guys that make a jump from tier 3 to 2 or tier 2 to 1, that's the difference of you winning a league, because you're getting such a value on that player. So let's talk about some of the third-year wide receiver potential breakouts, the guys who are entering their third year in the NFL that we think are in a position, whether it be the quarterback, the offense, the combination of skills, all these things might come together for them. Andrew Erickson, let's start with you. Who is somebody that fits the bill as a potential wide receiver 1 breakout from the third-year class?
So my number 1 guy, and I would have different guys listed, but D-Bro beat me to the Google sheet and got all the best ones. So just
early bird gets the worm. You can agree with D-Bro too.
It's happened to me. Just to say, it's happened to me too.
So D-Bro is starting to catch on. He's got to be He's got to be faster. So I'm going to start with Jerry Jeudy here from the Denver Broncos. Now, this may come as a shock to many of you that have been listening to the podcast, because I am the number 1 Cortland Sutton stan on planet Earth, as I like to think. So, but I also realize that it's still a really good situation, a good opportunity for Jerry Jeudy, who's entering his 3rd year. And I know that Jeudy, if you're just looking at the box score, really hasn't been really productive over the past 2 seasons. Now, his rookie year, it was horrible quarterback play. He flashed at times, but really never really put it together. He did have a high target share, which is it suggests that he's a talented player. And when you watch him play, he looks like he's really good on the field. Like, he's a guy that's an elite separator, 96th percentile separation percentage in 2021. So the talent is there. You know, he was a first-round pick for a reason. He played at Alabama, was very productive at the college level. So there's no denying that Jerry Jeudy has the skill set to be a wide receiver 1. And now he finally has a quarterback in place that has fueled wide receiver 1s year in and year out with Tyler Lockett, Doug Baldwin, DK Metcalf. So we've seen it before, whereas the other quarterbacks that Jeudy was playing with, there was nothing. There was no hope that Drew Lock, Teddy Bridgewater could fuel a wide receiver 1. It wasn't possible for Jeudy. So, and then last year, Jeudy obviously got banged up. It looked like he was going to start off the season really great. He started with his week 1 game was excellent, but he was lost for about half the season with an ankle injury. But so going back to the fact with Russell Wilson now being added into the scope of Jerry Jeudy's year 3, I mean, this is what you want to look for when you're looking for these tier jumpers, as Joe, you kind of put so elegantly. Quarterback play matters so much. And that's something that when you look back at Cooper Kupp was not inside the top 12 rankings last year. And what happened? Oh, he got a good quarterback. Oh, what do you know? Now he's number 1. So it seems really simple to be like, oh, well, now he's a good quarterback. Now he'll make the jump. But I think it really can be that simple. If Jerry Jeudy ultimately becomes Russell Wilson's go-to target in this offense and it's not Cortland Sutton, then I think Jeudy has the talent that can match the opportunity that he now has. I expect Jeudy, even if he doesn't make the leap to wide receiver 1 status, he's going to have a career year. I have no doubt in my mind that Judy's going to be a productive fantasy asset to some extent in year 3, as long as he can stay healthy. So that's my pick for number 1.
And hopefully he avoids legal issues. Let's see if it all fixes itself. Yes. But I'm always of the mind, if you understand the quarterback, you understand the quarterback play, you understand the offense, and the trickle-down effect then comes into everything else in fantasy. So it all starts at the top Just like in the NFL, you either have the quarterback and you can compete or you don't. Same thing. You either have the quarterback who's going to help with these fantasy assets or they're not. And it doesn't just mean the wide receivers. It means the running backs too. We're talking about moving the chains. We're just talking about putting points on the board and getting scoring opportunities. And it's funny. We spent enough time together now where we've had positive Jerry Jeudy impact on you, and you have turned around and somehow got in my head, and I just selected Cortland Sutton in a draft in best ball. So there you go.
Love to
this
see
is
it.
all coming together. This is what we love to see it. Let's go to you, Derek Brown. Give me a name on your list of guys who's a third-year wide receiver that could fit into this category of breakout into a wide receiver one.
Well, I know this guy is Derrickson approved, so I'm going to lead off with him. This is the one that it's the low-hanging fruit. And before I lean into this name, there was something when I was doing all my research for this podcast. I looked back over the last 4 seasons and basically just so people can kind of wrap their heads around, like if you're looking for these breakout guys, basically over the last 4 years, the wide receiver 12 in fantasy points per game, and this is over the new 17 games that we have. You're looking for a player that can average or at least hit somewhere in the neighborhood of these marks, because this is what the wide receiver 12 has done over the last 4 years. They've had 146 targets on average, 102 receptions, almost 1,200 receiving yards, and 8 receiving touchdowns. So if you're looking for these players, in your mind's eye, you have to build some type of scenario or positive case that they can hit or at least get close to these benchmarks. So just to throw that out for context, but the low-hanging fruit here is Michael Pittman. I know that we all love him. I really think the Colts are going to throw more this year. I've said this on previous podcasts. I'm going to say it again. Last year, weeks 1 through 9, Indy was 9th in neutral script passing rates. And then they realized Carson Wentz is terrible. And they just said, okay, we're just going to feed Jonathan Taylor the ball the entire freaking game, and we can win because we have a good enough defense. This year, with Matt Ryan in town, Pittman is going to gobble up targets. And you see that, I think that the Colts are going to be more pass heavy. So all this means that Michael Pittman has this type of upside to gobble up the volume, because last year when they were a more pass heavy team, he was averaging 7.9 targets per game, 73 receiving yards. See, here we go, benchmarks. Because if you go back to those numbers I gave you earlier, you're looking at 8.6 targets per game, 69.6 receiving yards per game. And he was averaging over a half a touchdown per game. So we're talking about a player that he was doing this last year. Now all we need to see, and over that span, he was the wide receiver 15. So he was knocking on the door of doing this.
Right.
All we need to see is the improved quarterback play for the entire season, and Michael Pittman's going to be inside the top 12.
I venture to say he needs one other thing. And the other thing that I believe he needs is a friend. He needs somebody else out there who can be a legitimate wide receiver in this offense. And I think that's another thing that the Colts struggled with last year. When you are the only guy and people realize, well, he's the only guy, let's just take him out of the equation, force them to just run the football all day with Taylor, and that's how we're going to game plan on the defensive side. It changes the dynamic. So I hope if it's Pierce, if it's somebody else steps up, I'm not holding my breath for Paris Campbell.
Hey, he said he's healthy. He said he's 100% healthy and ready to go.
Great.
In May.
Speaking of players that we're hoping
straight
are
from
healthy.
the FantasyPros news desk. That's right from my app. There it is. I see it right now. Paris Campbell is healthy. But seriously, he needs a little bit more help. And I do agree. I think he's got all the right tools. And finally, a quarterback, I think, that can take him to that next level. Who can get to the next level? Who's next on your list, Andrew, from the wide receiver one potential group, but third-year wide receiver?
Yeah, so for me, it's probably one of the more polarizing players to talk about in fantasy is Gabriel Davis for the Buffalo Bills. And it's weird because he's had a very weird career arc in terms of how he's gotten to this point entering year 3, because he really hasn't played a lot his first 2 years in the NFL. Like, he's been a backup on the outside for veteran wide receivers that have played on the Bills, but there's no denying that every time Gabriel Davis is playing a full-time role on the Buffalo Bills, the guy is scoring fantasy points. And that matters to me. That's the difference between him and a guy like Jerry Jeudy. Jeudy has the pedigree. He has the draft capital. He has the investment, but he has not produced at all. Whereas Gabriel Davis, over the last 6 games that he's played, when he was playing a full-time role, running around on 88% of the Bills' dropbacks, almost 20 fantasy points per game, 16 expected fantasy points per game in PPR format. So the fact that he has just been the hurdle he has to overcome is being a full-time player. That's what we're looking for Gabriel Davis to take a step in year 3. And when I look at the depth chart, I just I don't see a scenario where you have the 3 guys, Jameson Crowder, Isaiah McKenzie, and Khalil Shakur, those are the three guys that are like next in line to be that wide receiver 3 in this offense. And I mean, Jamison Crowder he's played 16 games once over the last 4 years. He is a slot receiver. Isaiah McKenzie made special teams money in the offseason. That's what the Bills signed him to. And Shakir was drafted in the 5th round as a rookie. I think that he offers a lot of upside, and I'm surprised that he went in the 5th round, but he's still a rookie. And the Bills have shown that they are more than happy to play veterans over rookies. Like, we're going to be frustrated probably more with Shakir not playing over guys like Jamison Crowder throughout the season whenever Shakir makes a splash play down the field. So for me, I'm looking at it and like, Gabriel Davis is the only other perimeter receiver on this Bills team besides Stephon Diggs. And who was really good on the Minnesota Vikings that caught like 10 touchdowns every single year playing opposite Stephon Diggs? Do you guys remember who that was? Oh, yeah, it was Adam Thielen. And that guy's still catching double-digit touchdowns. And that's the path for Gabriel Davis to be an absolute monster, is touchdowns. He is top 5 in the NFL in end zone targets over the last 2 years. This guy is a part-time player. He started 16 games over the past 2 seasons. So top 5 in yards per catch over the last 2 years. Like I mentioned, top 5 in total end zone targets. Like he's gobbling up all these high value touches, and now he finally has a chance to be a full-time player. So for me, it's Gabriel Davis, and just kind of looking historically at his career arc, some of the comps I looked at, looking at a player that basically has scored 13 touchdowns without starting more than 16 games. And the best comps are Calvin Ridley, Tyreek Hill, Dez Bryant, entering year 3. All those guys smashed in year 3. Like, they were just all wide receiver 1s. Martavis Bryant fit that category. He was suspended for his 3rd season. He did not play. And then the other 2 guys are Austin Collie and Chris Henry. So those were middle range picks.
Collie. Wow.
But the thing with those 2 particular players is they were solely entrenched as number 3s. Austin Collie had to play behind Pierre Garçon and Reggie Wayne, and Chris Henry was behind TJ Houshmandzadeh and Chad Ochocinco. So when I'm looking at these types of players and where Gabriel Davis kind of falls in the archetype, he falls more on the first guys I talked about. And I hate to be like, oh, he's going to be Ridley, Hill, and Dez Bryant, but that's where I'm leaning. And so if it's a coin flip, whether Gabriel Davis is going to be Calvin Ridley or Austin Collie, I'm going to lean on the Calvin Ridley side, especially playing in such a high-powered offense.
Well, look, Gabriel Davis was one of the guys last year I was super high on. And anybody who listened to the shows or watched the mock draft shows, they saw me take Gabriel Davis all the time. And it was frustrating the first 6 weeks of the season to see how he wasn't being used. And then, of course, you get into the later part of the year and then the playoffs. And it was all there because if you watched the year before, you saw in big spots where Josh Allen was looking for him in the end zone, looking for him in big plays. And I thought, oh, second year, he's going to crush it. But instead, they went back to Beasley, went back to some of the other wide receivers. Emmanuel Sanders had a good start to the season last year. We all remember that. But I hope so, because everything is aligned, and this guy does have the quarterback to do it. Derek Brown, give me another name on your list of the wide receivers in their 3rd year that you think have the potential to hit 1 status.
I'm going to go to a guy that broke out as the number 1 wide receiver in his own offense, and there's nothing standing in his path to sit here and repeat that this year, and that's Darnell Mooney. I mean, in the 5 games without Allen Robinson in the lineup last year, you're looking at a guy that was on pace for 88 receptions, 163 targets, and over 1,300 receiving yards. I know it's a small 5-game sample, but he checks all these different boxes that I talked about with Michael Pittman. And even if you look at different types of correlation to, okay, maybe they didn't get the touchdowns, but are they getting the volume and things like that? His receiving yards per game would have been wide receiver 7, looking at the splits without Allen Robinson last year. And receiving yards per game, although it sounds like a really rudimentary stat, it correlates high to year after year wide receiver production because a lot of it's a function of volume and talent. So looking at Darnell Mooney, who's taking away the volume? Okay, nobody. Who, Velus Jones? Hell no. No. Cole Kmet's going to be their number 2 pass catcher, but Darnell Mooney showed last year he does have the talent. I know he's slight, but he showed he can win outside. This coaching staff, they'll move him around the formation and get him loose. And the thing that Darnell Mooney needs this year to get him up to that level, because again, I don't think the talent or the volume are the concerns, it's the touchdowns. Because he only had 11 red zone targets last year, and unless he's breaking off big plays, that was 38th amongst wide receivers. So he does need the touchdown bump, because even with these great splits without Allen Robinson, he's pacing for 3 touchdowns on the season. He's going to need more than that to jump up into this wide receiver 1 category. But outside of touchdowns, which, guys, we know is fluky year over year, that's why I pointed to all the other metrics that I cited, he has all of the other things, like he's checking different boxes. And so if we get Justin Fields taking a step forward in his sophomore year, if we get Darnell Mooney used more creatively in the red zone, I mean, he's that dark horse top 12 wide receiver that's going to come out of a place like, I mean, we've seen like Allen Robinson came out of just dumpster fireville in previous years. We've seen wide receivers do it that have not been on good offenses or, top 5, top 10 scoring offense. So it's possible.
It's also funny to me because Chicago's been a place where it's been tough to be a prolific passer, period. They've never had a quarterback throw for 4,000 yards in a season. Not Jay Cutler, not Orton, not any of those guys. And Justin Fields would be the first to do it. That would be interesting if he did. But I think you're right, D-Bro. That's the one thing you keep coming back to. Can the quarterback get him there? Can he get him that touchdown over? Can he get him the enough yards to reach this mark? Everything is lined up. Mooney's one of my favorite guys. A couple years ago in his rookie year, that game that he had, I think it was against the Bucks on a Thursday night, watching that kid fight for the football in those big spots, I was like, who is this Darnell Mooney guy? I want to watch more of him. And I'm telling you right now, I am hopeful he can get there. And if Justin Fields takes that next step, he would certainly be one of these guys who has the potential to reach wide receiver 1 status. Andrew Erickson, who's another guy for you that might be able to reach that status now that they're in their 3rd year in the league?
I'm going to go with San Francisco 49ers wide receiver Brandon Aiyuk. And I think a lot of us thought that Aiyuk would have the Debo year from last year, where Aiyuk had a really impressive rookie season. He was basically a top 5 wide receiver for a large stretch of time from weeks 3 through 15 during his rookie year because of injuries to George Kittle and to Deebo Samuel. And Aiyuk just ate up all of the opportunity in the 49ers offense over that time. So we were expecting big things from him in 2021. He was going ahead of Deebo Samuel in a lot of drafts. I drafted Aiyuk in front of Deebo Samuel. And yeah, I was wearing a clown mask for the majority of the season because of that mistake that I had made. So weeks 1 through 7.
I think everyone made that mistake, Erickson. In all fairness, same. I mean, in terms of ADP, it was clear where we were, and Deebo was hurt perennially. So nobody, and how good was that Aiyuk finish in 2020? I mean, it was fantastic. Everybody thought that's where it was going, but it wasn't.
Yep. So, and that's important to remember with some of these guys that really flash as rookies and then kind of have, not lackluster second years. Deebo Samuel is a perfect example of that. Like, do not bury the guys that don't necessarily take the leap in year 2 because that talent potential was still there as a rookie. It's more important, honestly, that they show out as a rookie in their first year than I think as a second-year player. So Aiyuk, but at the beginning of this season or this past season, weeks 1 through 7, he ranked 98th out of 102 wide receivers in yards per route run. It was horrible. He was in the doghouse. He was dealing with an injury that kind of threw him off in training camp. The coaches just didn't have a lot of trust in him. But towards the second half of the season, when they converted Deebo more into the running back role, Aiyuk became the traditional wide receiver 1 on the 49ers offense. His yards per route run increased to 2.16, which ranked 13th. From week 8 onward, he averaged 13.1 fantasy points per game as the wide receiver 24, and he ranked 6th in yards after the catch per reception. So he kind of showed again what he had done as a rookie towards the end of last season. And basically, it's like, Aiyuk, if you can just kind of put together your end of seasons, like, finishes into one 16-game stretch, then we could see a wide receiver 1 season from Brandon Aiyuk. His target rate per route run, 21% during the second half of the year, was the same as Deebo Samuel. So again, that's trying to take out and factor in that Deebo was playing running back. When they were both running routes, they were both seeing equal opportunities in the passing game. So I think that I think with Deebo, I think we're going to see some regression from him just in terms of his production. I just don't expect him to score 8 rushing touchdowns again. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. I just don't think that's going to happen with Deebo. And if those touchdowns come down, where are they coming from? Are they coming through the passing game? Is Brandon Aiyuk going to see more scores? Because I think that's something that can vault players up. And I think that's why we see so much variance year to year with the wide receiver 1 position is like scoring double-digit touchdowns back-to-back seasons is really hard to do. And when you score double-digit touchdowns, you'll find it's very easy to finish as a top 12 wide receiver because of the boost that you get from that production. So Brandon Aiyuk for me is my 3rd guy.
All right, D-Bro, who's your 3rd guy from the 3rd-year class?
So I guess I'm going to go low-hanging fruit again. But this is...
It's the best tasting fruit, to be honest with you. It's delicious.
I mean, it is, though. But, I mean, look, he's got a massive upside, and everybody was talking about him last year, and I think we saw both injuries because Dak dealt with some things, as well as the injuries around him. CeeDee Lamb could take that leap forward this year. All the efficiency metrics were still in place last year to vault him into this realm of wide receiver 1 territory. He was 20th in yards per route run. He was wide receiver 15 in receiving yards per game, wide receiver 16 in yak per reception. Like, all he needs is volume, and I think he's going to get it this year. Michael Gallup, we're hearing talks like maybe he doesn't start the year 100%. Maybe he goes on the pup. Then you're looking at a passing attack, and this is all come down to, okay, Amari Cooper's out of town as well. CeeDee Lamb, Dallas is telling us CeeDee Lamb is going to be the guy, and they're going to move him back inside. Regardless of, even if Gallup is not going to be healthy, I think CeeDee Lamb is going to play a ton out of the slot like we saw in his rookie season, because even if Gallup's not out there, they could run James Washington out there with Jalen Tolbert on the outside to keep CeeDee Lamb on the inside and just let him dominate and eat up nickel corners. So CeeDee Lamb, like I said, low-hanging fruit, but he's a guy that you're probably going to have to pay up in a lot of drafts, but the ceiling is there. It's absolutely there.
And he's such a mismatch in that position in the slot, especially when you play against those teams that don't have the corners that move. It's just, look, this is the guy I wanted to be a wide receiver 1 so bad last year. Unfortunately, fell a little short, but I'm ready to love again. And the low-hanging fruit, I'm telling you, as somebody who's 5'7", that's the one I'm going for. It's excellent. I recommend it to everybody. All right, let's talk about the guys in their second year. Now, obviously, it takes a little bit more for these guys to hit, a little less time in the league, but certainly a lot of potential. And some of these guys we're going to talk about next flashed some wide receiver 1 type games, but unfortunately didn't quite hit that mark. So let's talk about some guys in their second season. Andrew, we'll start with you again. We'll go back over. Give me a guy, second-year player that you think has the upside to be a wide receiver 1.
I'm going to go with New York Jets wide receiver Elijah Moore. Basically, when you look at his season last year, during his last 6 games, he was the wide receiver 2 overall in fantasy points scored. And that was when he was catching passes from Mike White, Zach Wilson, and Josh Johnson. One of Josh Johnson's 2 teams that he played for last year. Need me remind you, everyone. So, look, 16.1 fantasy points per game over that stretch, ranked 5th. If it had been, during the remainder of the season. So you definitely feel a lot of like Aiyuk vibes from Elijah Moore's season last year.
Well, if it's Aiyuk, I think they would be Iibes. So I think it's okay.
Because he did it with there really wasn't much around him. There was Jamison Crowder was hurt, Corey Davis was hurt. So he was really the only man in town. And that's not the case here in year 2 with Elijah Moore because they drafted Garrett Wilson. But I can't help but think that the situation reminds me of a poor man's like T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, where you have this super talented player and, Zach Wilson taking a step in year 2 potentially. Now it's a lot to ask for Zach Wilson to be anything like Joe Burrow, and Garrett Wilson's obviously not the talent of Jamar Chase, but I think that Elijah Moore's rookie year was similar to T. Higgins' rookie year, and it was really productive. And then we were all kind of like ready to buy into Moore like all the way, and then they just drafted this guy in the top 10. You're like, oh man, like we have to we got to temper expectations now with Elijah Moore, like we had to do to somewhat with T. Higgins. But that didn't stop T. Higgins from balling out because he's uber talented, and that's how I feel about Elijah Moore. He averaged 12 PPR points per game, and as a second round pick, that's the same type of average that guys like A.J. Brown, Deebo Samuel, Juju Smith-Schuster, Michael Thomas, Chase Claypool, and the aforementioned T. Higgins averaged as rookies, also as second-round picks. So he fits in a tier of category of these second-round receivers that take massive leaps in year 2. So even though the situation maybe isn't ideal, I'm going to bet on the talent winning out with Elijah Moore.
It's funny. I also think that when we get closer to draft day, they're going to have a lot more Garrett Wilson buzz. And I think Moore's stock is going to drop a little bit in certain drafts. And if he does, I think he's an interesting pounce because I agree with you. Their upside is there. D-Bro, who's got some upside in year 2 of their career to be a wide receiver 1?
Oh, come on, guys. It's Rashod Bateman season. It's absolutely Rashod Bateman season.
Talk about low-hanging fruit. This is like a potato. It's like under the ground. This is like, it's going to pull it out. This is low-hanging fruit. It's not even fruit. It's a vegetable.
Get the shovel.
It's starch.
Hey, look,
shovel, baby. Let's go.
Willing to get the shovel. Willing to pull out the shovel because, and I'm not digging myself a hole here, but like people look at Rashod Bateman in the context of this offense, and I'm like, How can he not? They're like, oh, it's run heavy. Oh, it's Lamar throwing him, and it was a running back throwing him the ball. Does everybody not understand that Marquise Brown commanded the 12th highest target share, 21st in air yard share last year?
He was
And
brilliant the first 6 weeks of the season. I mean, and I had to sit there and eat it because he was terrible the year before. He would run the wrong route. He would have ball goes through his hands. The only time he would score, and he had that stretch, remember 2 years ago, where he scored like every week, is because some defender would fall down in front of him and he would just run. And it was the craziest thing to watch. That's the stuff that doesn't show up in the box score. But when you watch the games, you see it and you go, I can't believe he's going to get away with another one. And the next week, I can't believe he's going to get away with another one. It was brilliant. But I'm with you, dude. So what is holding Bateman back?
I think nothing. Honestly, nothing. All we need is a full season to see it unfold. And you look at the target share and everything that Marquise Brown got last year, and I'm not going to be hyperbolic in saying this, Bateman is a more talented player than Marquise Brown. So do we believe that he can command that type of target share in this offense? Hell, even maybe more of a share, because Sammy Watkins is gone. It's basically him and Mark Andrews and a host of other schmoes that are behind them that are going to get targets. And I just want to remind everybody the type of prospect that Rashod Bateman was coming into the league, because he was hurt to begin the year. Then he had to get up to speed really fast coming off of a long layoff and build rapport with Lamar Jackson. But this is a guy coming into the league who was, as a 2020 prospect, 12th in yards per route run against man coverage, 19th against zone coverage. He was an 81st percentile college dominator and a 93rd percentile breakout age. That type of talent didn't go by the wayside, people, after 1 year where we didn't even see him play a full season. And now Baltimore's saying, all right, just ship Marquise Brown over to Arizona. It's all good, because we have a guy here that we think can take that leap and be the spearhead with Mark Andrews for this passing attack. All in for Rashod Bateman season.
On the ECR over on FantasyPros.com, Bateman is wide receiver 33 right now.
That's
by the way.
It's terrible.
It is that's why I wanted to bring it up, because I agree that it's egregious. But maybe if we just tell our listeners, it'll be okay. But like, I don't want it to go up too high. But this is the thing: you get Bateman as a wide receiver 3, Gabriel Davis as a wide receiver 3. Some of these names we're talking about guys that are going to take a jump potentially from that wide receiver 3 draft range to wide receiver 1. Let's go back to more of the second year talents. Give me another name, Andrew Erickson, that you think has that potential to leapfrog into the wide receiver 1 conversation.
I'm going to go with DeVonta Smith, wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles. I think that his rookie year is kind of being overlooked because it wasn't the Jalen Waddle season. It wasn't the Jamar Chase season. And DeVonta Smith has the other, top 15 first-round pick from that class. I think it's a little bit overlooked. But, I mean, he was really good given with what he had to work with last year. Remember, after week 7, the Eagles were like, you know what? We're not throwing the ball anymore. Like, we're just going to run the ball. And it's really hard for a wide receiver to produce in an offense that's literally running the ball on more than 50% of their plays. And that's exactly what happened with the Eagles. But Smith still finished 10th overall in air yard share, was top 20 in PFF receiving rate among receivers at least 100 targets. So it was a really good rookie season that if Chase and Waddle weren't breaking records, we'd be talking about Smith as like, wow, man, this guy had like a really great rookie season. I want to see what he can do stepping into year 2. He had a 21% target share, which I think means he's going to still command targets in this offense. And the hurdle he has to overcome is A.J. Brown's arrival into the offense as a true alpha, and I do expect A.J. Brown to be the alpha in this offense. But look, we talk about running backs getting hurt. Receivers get hurt too. And A.J. Brown has a long track record of knee injuries. Like, the guy has gotten knee surgery, I feel like, at the end of every season he's played. And I'm sure that had to play into the Titans wanting to move on from A.J. Brown. And I love A.J. Brown. Like, I've drafted him in the second round all day long. But I realize that there is some concern with him staying healthy long term. And if there's an injury that's going to occur with Brown, then DeVonta Smith showed as a rookie that he's not one of these players where when you put him as the number 1, you're like, oh no, like now he's going to face all the good corners. He's not going to be able to do anything. Like, I don't believe that. Like, I think Smith can rise to the occasion and command targets like he showed last year in an offense that I expect to throw the ball much more than they did last year. You don't trade for A.J. Brown because you're going to run the ball on more than 50% of your plays. Like, you trade it because you're ready to take a step forward and throw the ball downfield, which I do think even with Brown entrenched as the underneath possession receiver, I think Smith is actually going to be the vertical threat in this offense. So I think there's splash play potential with DeVonta Smith. And if he's going up against number 2 corners, we could see him have a lot of productive weeks that could vault him up into wide receiver 1 status.
So the caveat being is that there would have to be at least some missed time from AJ Brown for Smith to reach this number, correct?
Yeah, I mean, being realistically speaking, it's
because
it's
you
tough.
can't have Jalen Hurts be the guy
Yeah.
because the support and offense is going to have two wide receivers.
That would be definitely aggressive. But again, there are always it seems like every single season be interesting to go back and look. But we see a lot of time where two wide receivers from the same team both finish as wide receiver ones. So
right, but typically they have a quarterback.
Yes.
Who's very, very good.
Yeah, I would not put Hurts into that category as of right now.
No offense, D-Bro. I know you love Jalen Hurts, but
I'm just sitting back here listening to all this Hurts slander.
It's not a slander.
It's
be realistic. He's not a prolific thrower of the football. I'm not saying he can't take another step forward this year. Of course he can. Russell Wilson took big steps forward in his career early on, right? I mean, there's always room to get better. I mean, Josh Allen, look how much work he put in. Look how amazing he is at this point. A lot of people never thought he would develop into that kind of passer. Different arm talent, but still same concept. All right, let's go back to you here. Give me another second-year dude who might become the dude as a wide receiver one, D-Bro.
Well, I'm going to wipe off the slander, and I'm going to. I talked about this passing attack on a previous episode, and I'm going to lead off with it's nasty, it's gross. I'm not telling you that you don't have to pinch your nose before I give you this name, but Kadarius Toney. Who in the Giants' passing attack are we looking at going to step forward for them? Is it Kenny Galladay? Sterling Shepard? Wanda Robinson? Who's their tight end? No. It's not Ricky Seals-Jones. Kadarius Toney, when we saw him on the field last year, he flashed. I know it was a small sample size, but this team is probably going to throw a good bit with Brian Daboll. I don't see them just going like, we're going to be a top 5 rushing rate team. Don't see that happening. And considering the depth chart around him, plus the efficiency that Kadarius Toney showed us last year in a small sample, because Toney, amongst all wide receivers of 50 or more targets, was 11th in yards per route run. He was 8th in yak per reception. He was 6th in targets per snap. So when he was on the field and he was healthy, I know it wasn't much, he was getting a lot of looks in their passing attack. And if we believe, again, like targets are earned, he was earning them at a high rate. So now all we have to see is, okay, does the health comply? Is Daniel Jones just not god awful? And if those things happen, yes, I get that I am kind of going with the uglier, nastier teams, and it's maybe you got to squint a little bit harder to visualize some of this stuff. But Kadarius Toney, he's checking a lot of efficiency boxes that if we get the full season out of him, he gets the volume that I think he could rise to the occasion here.
Well, he also seen the ability to take over games, which is, he might not be the kind of guy who could fall into the consistency realm of a wide receiver one, but in terms of if he has a couple smash games, at the end of the day, the points might total up. And I think that's a different way of looking at it. It doesn't have to be the guy who does it like Cooper Kupp, who every week he's just amazing. There might be 5 amazing games or off the chart games for Toney and then some other not so great ones. There's certainly the possibility there. Do you worry about his size at all too, being a little bit smaller? He's 6 foot, about 194.
Not essentially. I mean, that's not how he wins with physicality. It's all foot speed, and how he gets releases off the line. So his size doesn't really come into too much to play unless like you want to go down like the injury rabbit hole and look at it that way. Mm-hmm. But just straight up like in a vacuum, I'm not so worried about the size. And I like the fact that you talked about like the differences of ceiling games and that helping to vault. Do y'all think it's funny every single time that somebody like posts a screenshot of like a game log of a wide receiver and they say, does this guy look like a wide receiver one to you? Every wide receiver is volatile. Unless you were Cooper Kupp last year, you're going to have peaks and valleys. That's called playing the wide receiver position, people. They have ceiling games. They have other games where they're just they're not great. None of these wide receivers are going out and giving you, unless you're Cooper Kupp of last year, giving you 100 yards on a touchdown every freaking week. So don't come at me with, oh, look at this game log. You think he's really going to get up there? That's every wide receiver.
Take a note, everybody. Do not come to D-Bro's house with a game log.
Don't show me game logs.
Don't go flat. I'll close that door right in your face. Take this game log. Get out. Take your pamphlets with you. Let's have some fun here, because sometimes we do get some rookies who become wide receiver ones. Now, I asked both of these two fine young gentleman here to rank the possibility of the rookie wide receivers getting to this level. So here are the ranks, and I'm going to go 5 through 1 for both, and then we're going to have a little fun time here. So Andrew Erickson, again, this is the possibility of these guys getting there. Jameson Williams was Erickson at number 5. Then his 4 was Garrett Wilson, Skyy Moore at 3, Treylon Burks at 2, Drake London at 1. Derek Brown ranked them: Christian Watson at 5, Chris Olave at 4, Treylon Burks at 3, Skyy Moore at 2, Drake London at 1. I want to start with Drake London because you both had him as number 1. Now, you guys are telling me, again, here we go again. We're going to have another argument about this. So we just set up Andrew even called me elegant on the show. That happened. In case you didn't catch it, rewind the podcast, go back to the beginning, and he said, I elegantly described, you have to have the quarterback play in order to get there. So, Derek Brown, you're telling me Marcus Mariota could be elegant enough to make Drake London a wide receiver 1 in his rookie season?
I think Drake London can be elegant enough to elevate Marcus Mariota. He doesn't have to be the belle of the ball. I think it could be the other way around.
Okay.
I think Drake London could be that good.
Give me a circumstance where that's happened recently in the last 5 years.
Don't
tell me Kirk Cousins.
Last year,
Kirk Cousins is far better thrower of the football than Marcus Mariota.
I'm not saying that Joe Burrow is not immensely talented, but do you remember what he did in his rookie season? And they said, I don't know if Joe Burrow can throw deep. He was pretty bad outside the numbers. And then they said, okay, let's get you a really talented wide receiver. And oh my Lord, we're completing deep passes, people. Marcus Mariota is not great, but if you go back to all those Titans days, who the hell is he throwing to? Rashard Matthews? Delaney Walker? Are these really the guys that are going to carry us to the promised land? Like, we could easily make a decent case, Joe, that Marcus Mariota was kind of, between offensive coordinators and everything else, kind of set up to fail in Tennessee, too.
It's fair. That's fair. You also had Drake London, so now it's your turn to try to sell me. You did an okay job, Derek. I want to hear Erickson's take down on this one. Well, so sell me on Drake London being able to reach that pinnacle.
I don't know, Joe. I think so I was going back and forth actually with Burks and London at number 1. And
so you want out of this number 1 ranking?
I think I might. I think I might switch it up because
my elegance did it to you.
The lack of conviction.
You make a really good point. I mean, Drake London's not my guy. I know he's D-Rose guy, but when you and that's something that I've been preaching, on this podcast, is talking about targeting guys in good offenses. And I guess the reason I put London ahead of Burks was I was thinking I think that both guys will probably see pretty similar target shares in their offenses. I'm not really concerned because Drake London's going to just see more passing volume because the Falcons, I feel like, are going to have to throw more. I don't think they're going to be as a competitive team, but when you're looking at red zone opportunities, look, Ryan Tannehill, say what you want, but he has a track record. He's done it before. He's fueled wide receiver 1s before with AJ Brown. And obviously AJ Brown has something to do with it because of how talented he is, but Burks, still a first round pick, a guy that can make plays after the catch. And I did have Burks here at number 1 first, and he has an equal, if not better, opportunity than Drake London in year 1. So yeah, I'm going to probably move Burks back up to number 1 and move Drake London back down to number 2. Joe, you have convinced me.
This podcast is a think tank. That's what we are. We are trying to all sit here and bring good information and then try to make the best decisions. And I think the hardest thing for all of us who play fantasy, who analyze fantasy, is to look at a player and want to buy into the talent and then continuously forget about the circumstance. We want to have that player succeed beyond the circumstance that player is given. And unfortunately, in the game of football, you need all of those things to break right. Sometimes the anomalies happen. I hope it does. And I think, just for the record, if one guy could do it and break it, I think you're right. I mean, the more Drake London you watch, the more you think, yeah, he could be a guy that helps out a Mariota. But what I don't understand is nobody said Skyy Moore as number 1. And he's got the best quarterback by far on this list. Okay. And possibly the biggest need there in this offense. Because I don't know. I mean, we've all talked about Juju. We've all talked about, what they've done, what they haven't done this offseason. So besides the number 1 guy you've got, who else? And I know you've got them ranked, but really, who do you think deep down in your cockles, Derek Brown, could be the rookie that becomes that guy? Is it just, besides Drake London, is it Skyy Moore because you got him too? Is it somebody else you could write that script for a little bit easier because of what that offense needs to be in year 1 for that wide receiver?
I think it's Skyy Moore. I think it's probably between him and It's between Skyy Moore and honestly, I think it's Chris Olave. I think that you look at those two guys. And the Olave point, I almost moved him. I was debating, but 2 through 4 was pretty fluid for me. Because Chris Olave, we're hearing all the stuff about like Michael Thomas might not be healthy, and good Lord, like at this point of the year, and he missed all of last season, and he's still not 100%. We can't assume Michael Thomas is going to just poof, be there and be the old Michael Thomas. We can't assume any of that. So you're looking at Chris Olave, and I think that the Saints are going to throw more this year than they did last year because, good Lord, they can't run any more than they did last year. They were top 5. They played slow. They basically did everything to say this offense is bad. We're going to grind it out, and somehow we're going to win games. And they did that. But this year, you have Chris Olave. If Michael Thomas is not there, he's competing for targets with who? Alvin Kamara, Adam Troutman, Jarvis Landry. Really? Like, we can't see him step forward. So I think for me, it's Skyy Moore for the obvious reasons. One, I just love Skyy Moore. And 2, you talked about the quarterback play. We know that Kansas City is still going to be a top 10 scoring offense. So all the parts or pieces are there for him to smash. But I think Chris Olave, if we're going off for one of these guys that's not in the top 3 right now, he honestly, I wanted to make a case and I wanted to push him up into the top 3, but it's not just where I finalize these because I think Treylon Burks has such an easy path to volume.
Yeah, Burks has, as Andrew said, Burks has a very easy path to volume. That was just 2/1 that was very fluid. And I agree. I think but in all honesty, you can see a lot of these rookie wide receivers all of a sudden becoming the dude very quickly. But what's so funny to me about Skyy Moore, it feels really eerily reminiscent of when Justin Jefferson was drafted. And he wasn't the first guy off the board, and he wasn't the second guy off the board. But when you looked at the need and what was coming down the pike for that offense, you could certainly write the script where you go, yeah, this guy could be phenomenal. And maybe he is not talked about as much as some of the other guys that went before him. But you put him with the right quarterback in the right situation with the right need, all of a sudden that could be it. Real quick, before we end today, let's have some fun. Give me a wild card 2nd or 3rd year guy that we didn't talk about. Again, this is wild card for fun. So if you're right about it, we can play this clip on social media forever and ever. And if you're wrong, people will forget because it was at the end of the show. So Andrew Erickson, do you have a wild card 2nd or 3rd year wide receiver that you wanted to talk about today? We didn't squeeze in that you think if everything broke right, they could be a wide receiver 1.
Oh man, what? So basically, this is going back to the Debo thing because it just burns in my memory how wrong I was about writing off Debo. And one of the reasons I remember fading Debo was because he had, despite the fact that he had a pretty productive rookie year, the ADOT. I was like just so honed in on his 2nd year average depth of target, which was garbage. It was like a running back. It was like behind line of scrimmage. And I was like, dude, there's no upside here. Like, what am I doing? And the player that has that happened to him last year was Laviska Shenault. Like, that's what happened to Shenault last year in year 2 after a very good rookie season. Like, Shenault, if you look at his rookie numbers, very productive as a rookie. And last year he almost had 100 targets. Yeah, it was terrible, but everyone is getting the pass in Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence is getting the pass. Etienne's getting the pass. Like, oh, it's all Urban Meyer, but like Shenault is just like buried now. And I get that they have moved on from him in terms of adding in other pieces. But what if he goes to a different team? Like, I still think Shenault has talent. And I think that he's shown that he is a talented player. And he got a raw deal last year. It's like, dude, like, it's not his fault the team was being coached by a legit donkey last year. So, of course, he didn't find any success. So, I still think Shenault is someone that I will not be surprised whatsoever. He has a much more productive year than we all are giving him. I mean, he's free now. He's just like, everyone has written him off. And when you just look at the raw numbers of him over the last 2 seasons, like, the guy's still seeing targets. And it wasn't that long ago that everyone was like really disappointed by Devontae Adams, despite the fact that he was still getting targets in his offense. And then he broke out all over the place. So I'm just saying Laviska Shenault, I think, is someone to keep an eye on. And right now he is like free. He's free in Dynasty. He's like free basically everywhere. And it just takes one team, an injury. Oh, let's trade for Shenault. And then boom. And then they're going to see how productive he'll be. Everyone's looking for the next Deebo Samuel. And Laviska Shenault is literally right there in Jacksonville for free. And we all know he has a very similar profile to Deebo. So I don't know. If I was the Patriots, man, I'd be coming to Laviska Shenault.
There we go.
I'd be calling him down.
Andrew Erickson, New England general manager. Derek Brown, is there a name? You don't have to say one if there isn't one. I don't want to force your hand. But if you had another guy that you were toying with putting on the list today, but you didn't for whatever reason, Who's that one that's like a deep sleeper version of this?
I mean, I'll just stay in the same kind of, we're going to go with good offense. I'm just going to go a little bit further down the depth chart. And if we're wrong about who's going to be the starters or the guy that breaks out, give me KJ Hamler. We've seen the deep speed.
Right.
The problem is bad quarterback play that can't throw down the damn field in Drew Lock and whoever else. And he's had injuries. We've seen ceiling games from KJ Hamler. We've seen the upside from KJ Hamler. He was a good prospect coming out of Penn State. We know the speed. He can take the top off of any defense. So if it's not going to be Jerry Jeudy, if Cortland Sutton's not going to be the guy, if we have injuries and people get off their Tim Patrick bandwagons, I mean, it honestly could be KJ Hamler.
I like that one. All right. That was fun. See, I promised everybody fun and I delivered. Also, I'm going to promise somebody a Deebo Samuel autographed helmet. So make sure you go to fantasypros.com/contest to enter today by subscribing to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/fantasypros, where we have all the amazing podcasts, all the short form, long-term videos, everything we got. It's there over on our YouTube channel. So subscribe to that today at Fantasy Pros. And then, of course, click that bell for notifications. Then go over to fantasypros.com/contest once you have the YouTube subscription. And then you could go get the Deebo Samuel helmet thanks to our friends at pristineauction.com. And also, remember, it's best ball season. Best ball draft kit is available on Fantasy Pros right now. fantasypros.com/bestball. There you go. We keep it simple here, so you remember it. The content is free, but we've got extra content for our subscribers. So subscribe today and become a premium member of Fantasy Pros so you can access even more great best ball information. That draft kit is loaded with everything you need to be successful. That'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. For Andrew Erickson and Derek Brown, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.